Welcome, listeners, to episode 20 of Future Secured. And today we're absolutely thrilled to have special guests Stas Filshtinskiy and Filiposki, the co-founders of AttackForge. Now, AttackForge is an innovative platform that's really revolutionising the way organisations are able to manage their pen testing and cybersecurity vulnerabilities. So we're going to dive in today to Stas and Fil's journeys into the world of cybersecurity, how they came about creating a platform that's really breaking down communication barriers between pen testers and engineers. And, from the conversations I've had with them, has created a new culture. And also, they're going to help share valuable insights on the challenges and the successes of building a cybersecurity business in Australia. So, welcome, Stas and Fil, and over to you, Jason, for the first question.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, and welcome, guys. We always have great conversations. I think for the listeners, this will be a great one, and I can't believe we're up to episode 20. I thought we would have been cancelled after at least 5, so this is it's a miracle we've made it this far. But look, a lot of people probably know, I know you guys back from a long way back. Probably back sort of 2018, that sort of vintage, but for the people who are watching this and probably seeing you guys for the first time, or even who know you and probably don't know a bit of the background, do you want to give us the how you sort of got to where you are now with AttackForge and sort of the lead up to that, how you guys met, where you were sort of working, what you were doing, and probably where you saw that gap, that AttackForge, feels so well now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Stas, I'll probably kick off. So,
Yep.
but yeah, Jason and Tom, thanks for having us on. So, good to catch up again. So, sort of jumping into security and sort of my pathway was very different to Stas's. I started working back in the mid 2000s for did some short term work for a product security company, and that was my first experience. Back then, it was a internet and content filtering company, which was kind of interesting. How times have changed.
Filtering's back.
Yeah, yeah, different types of problems nowadays. But yeah, so then sort of moved into more sort of project management, business analysis type background, and then did my sort of 5 year stint working in the government. But then got the craving to go back into security, and I was fortunate enough to get a role to help sort of project manage a team of hackers at BAE Systems, which is really where I met Stas. And from there, that was quite an interesting interesting change from managing software projects, which is where I sort of come from before that. And Stas and I sort of caught up, met each other at BAE, and we just sort of seemed to have a lot of similar, visions on really what were some of those common problems around pen testing that I was very quick to sort of start uncovering. And really that's where Stas and I sort of decided in 2014 to sort of branch out on our own and create a company to start trying to solve some of those, really hard challenges that we kept sort of seeing. And that sort of led us on that journey into ultimately creating, what is AttackForge today. But Stas, do you want to sort of fill some of those gaps?
I'm not again. In my case, my sort of venture into security and information security, it used to be called. And today started probably with classic mathematical education back in Ukraine, in one of the best mathematical departments in city of Kharkiv. Especially had an interest in things like cryptography. Uh, Later on, actually, along with my father, published some training materials, some small exercise books and training for around cryptography. With that, when I came to Australia, my first software development job 27 years ago was working on security product, writing software, and consulting internally and customers how to implement that software. That sort of set me up in a course and understanding that I want to go into security full time. That's what I want to do. Eventually, I ended up consulting as part of security function in INZ Bank, where I spent 7 years, which probably is the formative years for me as a security professional. I work with great people. I learn a lot from them. And one of my first lessons at the time from my first boss at INZ, uh, when she told me, your job is not just, find the problems, and your your job is to get people who can fix the problem to understand that it is important to fix it.
Mm.
That was her message probably within, I don't know, first 3 weeks at the bank.
Wow.
And I'm very thankful for that message, because that opened my eyes in a completely different aspect of security. Since that, when people ask me what is important, I always tell that 50% of information security, or cybersecurity as we say these days, specialist, is to make people change how they behave, persuade them to do things better.
Yep.
There at the bank, I was on receiving end of a lot of pen testing reports. Work with great pen testers, work with interesting companies that supply pen testing, and the bank at the time spent quite a lot of money on pen testing. And I vividly remember one episode when CISO of the bank came to sort of our corner of the office and said, okay, I spent such and such money on pen testing.
Mm.
I want to know what is the most common problem we have. Because if I know that, I would be able to justify where to put the resources. And also he asked a question, do we see the same problem again and again? Yes, but I want it in a diagram, want something that I can, again, show to my peers, show to the board, and use it as a explanation, like justification again, why they need to put the budget to fix the problem. And after that, some poor grad or intern spent next 2 weeks digging through, I don't know, that thick stack of reports in Word format, mostly, to dig out the actual data from it, turn them in a spreadsheet, and turn a spreadsheet into diagrams. That was a horror work for that person, but that was the only way. What struck me at the time is that the data exists, but it exists in a form that cannot be analyzed. Also, every conversation with either provider of pen test or with a consumer within the business always came around, okay, is it good? Is it bad? What has been tested? Like, oh, every morning, please tell me what's happening. Have you found something? How deep you are? And I also was vividly told every day of the delay for the pen test, for the report, cost projects, a lot of money, actually more money than actual pen test itself. Pen test could be 10 days, but the project team could burn through much more money in a day because they waiting for pen test results.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good adjunct, Stas, into sort of how you and Phil get together. You know, that's a good picture, and how AttackForge sort of came to be, because where you guys are at now, taking all that into consideration. That's how AttackForge came about.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I moved to BAE and I spent another 3 years on the supplying side and big independent consulting team, then where I met Fil, there was also conversation with consulting customers who say, I want more information. I want that information in a consumable form.
Yeah, so
And
you
there
kept
was
coming up against
nothing
the
like
same issues. Yeah, so it's the same ANZ, same at BAE, and across the market. That's why I've always loved you guys. Since I first met you guys and sort of seen what you're doing, the way you've actually been able to simplify it and the savings you've been able to make, from exactly what you're saying, Stas, to sort of, and sort of adjuncting to what Phil was saying, that, seeing pen testing as traditional form and still done today, people still,
Yeah.
I don't know why more people aren't using AttackForge, but, Phil, this is the whole point of it. We need to get that awareness out there because, there's still a lot of people wasting a lot of time on pen testing, sitting around waiting for reports, and, the ground shifts so quickly these days. So do you want to just give us a quick, now you're at AttackForge, what you guys are doing, and actually just give us like the sort of elevator pitch for people again out there who don't know sort of what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. So I guess just to add to that, Jason, before I dive in, so pen testing really wasn't built for scale. That was the key thing that Stas and I sort of uncovered. It sort of grew organically out of that need, over, especially with the internet and everything sort of coming, coming to the foreground in that sort of late 90s type time frame. A lot more need for security testing in general was evident, and organizations started to do more and more testing. But it wasn't until the boom of the web applications when all of a sudden there was products going left, right, and center out onto the market, and then security issues security researchers starting to find more problems, and then driving this need to have more testing actually done. So, but pen testing, because it was traditionally done as more as from a consulting perspective, nowadays we've got internal teams everywhere, and a lot of organizations recognize the importance of having internal security teams and pen testing teams. But back then there was very few people who could really specialize into this area, and so for that, it sort of grew from we come in, we do a big giant test, and we do it maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, and we'll try and test everything. And because of that approach, it made sense to be able to say, well, let's all. It's kind of like the software development lifecycle with the waterfall, where the traditional way of doing software was a waterfall. You have a big design phase and a big planning phase and and you get you go through each phase, and it takes a long time. So where pen testing was really in that phase. But then what sort of happened is over the last decade, definitely, but even probably more so, testing started to become much more frequently performed and required. And it started to drive, and regulations started to really creep in and start pushing for more testing. PCI or payment, the payment industry standard, the PCI DSS, that was probably one of the earliest pushes for having that or driving pen testing, and that from then there was a lot of other ones that sort of unfolded, but what that meant is organizations now had a need to do more and more testing, and that's where we started to see these gaps, because getting one report once a year is one thing. Getting a pen test done, once a week or once a month is a completely separate level of scale.
Jason and I are always very fascinated in the entrepreneurial approach. So when I'm looking at your website, NAB, Charter, Air Canada, Accenture, you've got some really big names on there. You're obviously delivering a fantastic kind of enterprise solution. So after Black Hat, I mean, how did you go with, I got to meet your team at CyberCon, you're growing and stuff like that, but you're still not too big. So tell us a little bit about that entrepreneurial journey. What were some of the challenges that you encountered along that way? Maybe you first, Stas.
It was several classic challenges because we used consultancy to finance product development and to pay bills. The biggest challenge for every consultancy at the beginning is the cash flow. We dealt with that, and one of the reasons because we managed to build consultancy of like one of the Australian sort of entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs call it consultancy of brain surgeons. We had the best people, and we made it such so they would love to work with us. As a result, we built our flow of customers. So that helped with this. another entrepreneurial challenge, especially in Australia, is access to the size of our market. Australian market is quite small, and it took us some time to recognize that because we made a conscious decision to target product initially and have an enterprise customer as a key customer, it took us some time to realize that there are limited market here in Australia, and we had to work externally with other big markets. First it was US, Europe, UK, Middle East. The markets of different level of maturity. US market is much more mature than anything else. However, there are extremely mature companies in Europe, especially North Europe, and in Middle East, who are again well ahead of others. And challenges entrepreneurial wise would be to adjust our message and to speak people culturally in a way that it is expected in a particular market. US buys differently from Europe. Middle East expectation on communications are different from US. And some of our consulting experiences help us to understand that better, because we delivered consultancy also to many to countries in Middle East and in East Asia and even in the US. So that helped. Plus our participation in trade mission with our cyber and Australian Trade and Investment Commission help us to understand the how US market operates, and help us to focus the message and talk to people that do make decisions. So that was the biggest, probably the biggest challenge. And then obviously COVID struck and stopped us from traveling and talking to people. And that create the biggest challenge become connecting. How we connect with different people when we can only see them on the screen.
So who's your ideal client now? Like now you're this far down the track, you've gone through that sort of journey. Who do you find now? Because that's the hardest thing I think for most businesses as an entrepreneur is you can have a great idea, you start to get some traction in the market, and you pretty much got clients from probably multiple different areas, but you're not sure where your market fit is now. Sounds like you guys are mature enough now to say this is our zone. What's that zone look like now? Where do you sort of target and focus?
We're in a situation in 2018, 2019 where some of our first customers, one of our sort of first few customers was a Fortune 20 organization. So we're sort of immediately dealing with the scale of the biggest companies out there, which forced us to kind of mature the product, but also as a product focused company, starting to make those early decisions to ensure that we have a product that can work across different industries and work with different types of organizations, whether you're whether you're a consumer of testing or whether you're a provider like a consultancy or MSSP. So we kind of we had to build the product in a way that has specialized workflows that cater for both, but it can be really configurable to work with everyone. And since then, if the question of who's our sort of ideal, we work with a lot of different industries. Whether it's oil and gas and mining, retail, lots of finance and healthcare, manufacturing. So what the need for pen testing and pen test and managing it at scale seems to be consistent across all industries. But that being said, we work with a lot of big consultant and managed security services providers who are also struggling to connect with their customers and keep up the demand of their services, and even provide a pen test as a service back to their own customers.
Yeah, so pretty much as soon as it's pen testing, it's pretty much you guys, depending on where they are in that life cycle, where they fit. You've pretty much got a market fit now for the top end and all the way through. So
Yeah,
and I think with your consulting background, I think that's helped you guys from watching you guys from the outside. I think that's one of the keys to why I think you guys were so successful is that you've sat on both sides of the fence. There's a lot of people go develop product and that they don't develop product, but they've never been in market and had to deliver or actually do any of the stuff that you guys have done. I think that's why you guys are such a good combination, is that you have that well-rounded skill that actually makes sure that you understand all those different bits and what's required at all those different levels. At an entry level, if you're only just starting with pen testing, if you've got full-on internal teams that are running, 24/7, you've got the full gamut there, or the full spectrum. So you've actually been able to, from what Tom and I have noticed, is actually really create products that have that perfect market fit wherever they sort of sit in that pen testing market.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can liken it to similar to what Atlassian have done with their Jira product. You can be a single engineer and find value in using that tool, or you could be an organization with 100,000 employees and use it in a different way. We've tried to create something like that, but for security testing and penetration testing. So that way everyone can benefit from it. So one of our earliest goals was to really create a tool that would help the entire industry and become that standard tool that everyone thinks of and uses when they know we need to manage pen testing. Well, AttackForge is the obvious solution to that.
Yeah,
I think it was 2021 at Cyber, just before Jason joined us. We had a Cyber Explorer, which is now part of the Australian Cyber Network. But we were getting that pen tested, and that was my first kind of under the lid exposure to the whole journey. And there were some challenges, when we found the problems, how to remediate them, how to get them all fixed. And one of the things I remember, Stas, when we were chatting in the past, you mentioned how literally a pen test report was generally valued by how many kilobits are in it or how much data. But with your platform, one of the things that's come up to me with these conversations is the way you've connected, the reports for executives, the engineers through to the pen testing, be able to decide, what is actually, where the investment needs to be. It sounds like a real cultural challenge you've managed to meet. Are you seeing that, users of the platform kind of really coming together and actually contributing to, a better business outcome as well?
Okay. The biggest cultural challenge of generally, like if you look on a pen testing side, the biggest cultural challenge is that pen testing is treated as a transactional event. Generally, you ask anyone who is deliver or consumer pen test, nearly everyone, what is the outcome of pen test? And the response will be, oh, I got a report. This is a transactional relationship where, I pay you for something, you give me a report, we don't see each other until next time I need something from you. And this is, in reality, the biggest cultural challenge, because it's created a situation where pen testers see themselves as someone who come, break other people's stuff, tell them how bad whatever they build are, and walk away. Engineers receive that and say, those not very nice people came to me, told me that I couldn't do my job right. So both sides are unhappy. There is no communication. They don't understand that culture builds an environment where there is no incentive, at least emotional incentive for both sides, to actually cooperate with each other. While the reason why pen test is happening, after we sort of remove all those, go to the core of it, is vulnerabilities in whatever infrastructure or applications means risks, means or that business can suffer consequences of different level of magnitude. So what it should be that pen test should help to fix those vulnerabilities. People who fix are engineers. People who find are pen testers. And culturally, the process is built in such way so it's adversarial. And again, from Phil and myself being on both sides of that fence through our work in security, we understood this is a problem. And pentesters told us, we're frustrated, we find the same vulnerability every year. No one wants to do anything about it. Engineers say...
That's a problem, isn't it? That's the thing
Yeah.
you see a lot, Stas, is that I've seen it
Absolutely.
as well. So many pen tests where, and then you go back and it's not fixed.
Yeah.
Like a gaping hole. And some stuff you just go, how has that not been fixed? That's a critical element to it, and you can give the report. And that's what I want to talk to you about too, because you guys, where was the pivotal moment for you guys where you sort of go, you've cracked the nut, or you knew you've done it? Because you mentioned, Stas, and this is the thing, I don't think a lot of people realise when they're starting a business, you go through a lot of shit, don't you? Like you've got to, you run out of capital, you've got to, you hit a brick wall with stuff, something doesn't quite go right. But for you guys together, where was that moment where you both sort of sat down, looked at each other, and said, "You know what? I think we've sort of cracked it." I know there's still, it's an ever evolving thing, but where was that moment for you guys where you both sort of sat down with each other and said, "Hey, I think we've sort of cracked the nut here a bit, and I think we're onto something." What was that point for you guys, and when was it?
Phil.
So yeah, I'd say probably that aha moment. So there's probably two of those. There's the first moment was when we got our MVP built and started using it with our own customers. And then probably within about 6 months, even though the product was quite rough, we started to see, particularly a lot of customers that were doing, many pen tests with us per year, they're starting to see that their reliance on the tool to understand what was going on with those vulnerabilities. Because from the start, we always built it to be engineer facing. So, people could bring their engineers and say, hey, these are all the vulnerabilities.
That's a special language too, isn't it, Phil? Like talking to engineers. It's a different way of communicating, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we knew early on that we were onto something there, but it probably wasn't until we actually did our first presentation at Black Hat over in the US. And we drew in quite a big crowd, and it was
that's
quite
daunting.
Was
there. That's always going to happen, mate.
Phil was presenting. We do dual show. Like Phil would present. His English is much better, and he's much more pleasant to look at. And I would stand aside.
That's debatable, mate. That's debatable.
Absolutely. Anyway,
we'll do a straw poll in the comments, Howard. We'll do a straw poll in the comments after.
And I was standing aside answering questions. And people would come and ask what it is and how it is and where it came from and all of that. That's how we presented. And it helps that there were two of us, because instead of the Phil's flow of presentation would go through, while people with questions would still be able to get the answers. Sorry, back to you.
You guys got but you've got that good balance, and I think that's it. If you get Black Hat, you get the right audience. You're speaking to them, and then you start to get that feedback instantaneous that it is. And then, as I say, just watching you guys from that sort of 2018 period onwards, I think that's where we sort of crossed paths. Has been so. I've only seen that part. I never saw the 4 years prior to that, or whatever that you guys sort of had to build it and go through the metamorphosis. But I think it's important for people to understand that. I think your story is really interesting. I think in that I'd love more people to know about this, and that's why I sort of shout it from the rooftops or go and talk to as many people as possible. And I think Stas, when Tom and I were talking to you, you were sort of saying 25 to 30%, just say on a time and income basis for a business. That's pretty big difference. And if you can get this information as live as possible and you can act on that rather than waiting a month or 2 or 3 for a report, that's key, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And what we've seen, for example, have seen in several big enterprises that some of them from beginning, some of them gradually stop producing like those PDF or Word reports at all. Only it has to be attached to some record somewhere. That's the only purpose. For everything else, there is a platform. You go there, you do it. They invite auditors to the platform. So when auditor doing the work on, let's say, PCI DSS, this is your set of projects related to PCI DSS. Look at them, see what been tested, when it was tested, who tested it. I'm a rep assessor myself. I love what I love to see. I want to see names, dates, and what happened with that. It's all there.
Yep.
It's written there. It's recorded. You can see. You can get your evidence, put it in your report, and that's it. And you walk away.
It's that distilling, like right from the start when you guys said, reports this thick, down
Yeah.
to living, breathing organism stuff that actually is live, gets in market and can be fixed
Yeah.
straight away, and is accessible for someone in a very clean and clear format. What that saves and what that does, and just the tracking and auditing of who did what at what time and when stuff's come in is fantastic. Because as you said, the old paper reports, I'd say to myself, PDF's gone through. People look at it, oh shit, there is all that stuff that needs to be done. We'll get around to it. Sits in a drawer or in a file somewhere on a computer, and that's the end of it, right? So this is something that I appreciate you sharing, because this is something I just don't think people get. How good what you guys do is that that in a nutshell is the key thing: the saving of time and money, and the actionability of what you do to actually jump on stuff straight away. Because as we know, it's shifting sands in cyber. You can't wait 2 or 3
Yeah.
months for a fucking report and say, oh yeah, that needs to be fixed now. It's probably a wide gaping hole someone's got into and actually causing a shit ton of damage now, because you just didn't move quick enough. So
And the
yeah,
general public, essentially they expect that this is all being done in the background and it's all being sorted out. I mean, the CrowdStrike, I think, was a beautiful example of a bit of human error in there, but the reality was that, when I spoke to people, that it kind of briefly smashed this idea that the internet was, layers of redundancy and all that kind of stuff, when we know it isn't. But look, I do kind of have to wrap us up now. It's been a fantastic conversation. We're getting close to time, but I think there were two things, listeners, that really stuck out to me today. I love when you're in consultancy mode that you built a consultancy of brain surgery as brain surgeons as a concept. I think that's the other one. I got to say I really loved is when you talked about the travel delegation with AusCyber, because Jason and I at CyberCon, and at RSA earlier this year, again, we met with the British Embassy, Vic Trade, and Austrade, and it's really great to see all those kind of delegations coming together. And I think the impact it made on you guys going from consultancy, because often there's a lot of need for grants and stuff like that. So another really, really great lesson to learn. So look, thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. A lot of really, really cool stuff here. Again, penetrating testing isn't something at this level that we've ever really talked about. So I think it's been fantastic having you on for a deep dive.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.